Welcome to the next module. We're going to talk about a CSM superpower. What is it? Empathy. So we're going to cover the definition and the impact of using empathy when you are a CSM or you're working in customer success. We're going to have a look at what skills make up this trait. We're going to put yourself in their shoes and think about what that actually means. We're going to look at balancing empathy with practical problem solving. And then we're also going to look at empathy being built on an attitude and a mindset of continuous learning. I'm going to pause for a moment. One of these that says, what skills make up this trait? The second point is something that has been really profound for me in all of life, not just within the realm of being a customer success manager. And that's thinking about traits as learned versus given. Now, my wife and I, we disagree about this very frequently, but the way that I think about it is that a trait, a character trait, is composed of a series of skills and variables that you know how to control and adjust in order to create a consistent outcome. And it can be thought about like a sport is a great analogy, or making a cold call. You might have a series of different openers that you can use when making a cold call. And then when you have that series of openers, you might have a permission-based opener, for instance. Or you might have an opener where you say, "How are you today?" And you might understand from doing it enough and having enough hands-on experience that when your inflection goes up, "How are you today?" it sounds a little bit different and might cause you to have a worse conversation than when your inflection goes down. "How are you today?" These are tiny, tiny little things, but they all roll together to create a skill. And when you have a series of different skills that you can consistently apply to create an outcome, I think you have a trait. And this is important because I believed that I was not empathetic and I could not be empathetic. And this is not something that naturally comes to me. This was one of my biggest objections when getting into any customer-facing role, let alone one that's designed around the success of those customers. So let's dive in. But do think, what beliefs do I hold that maybe don't serve me in this case? Now, as always, here's your warning. Put your distractions away. This is the most important video in the entire course because you are here and now with it. Okay? Don't skip, don't fast forward. Watch it all the way to the end so that you can maximize the chance that you hear that one thing that you need that helps take your next step. And as always, you can watch me fast. So let's define empathy. If we're looking at a dictionary definition, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And simply put, it's seeing things from their perspective. Sharing in their feelings, to me, maybe that's level 3. And I think I'm maybe level 2. And I'm able to understand and see how they may be feeling at that time. Some people naturally have this dialed up from when they're very young. Some people don't. If we're thinking about applying empathy actively, there's, as I was saying earlier, it's really hard if you don't intuitively do it. But something that I've noticed is asking great questions that you've thought about before, and using silence can help to give you the ability to process what they're saying. And there's a really interesting take from Chris Voss, who is the FBI negotiator who wrote Never Split the Difference, and it's called Tactical Empathy. And we can bring that up later because that's a book that was recommended to me by a customer success manager when I was transitioning into CS, and one that he mentioned was really impactful in his role. We're going to keep going for right now. So we're going to think about what impacts that it has, and I want you to go and think about motivation as a whole. And my belief is it comes from deprivation, right? When you're hungry, you're motivated to eat. When you're thirsty, so you're deprived of water, you're motivated to go and drink. So to effectively drive change, we may need to point out the gap between desired state and the current state. Empathy is the missing key to what language we use when we're pointing out that gap. I've sometimes come in a little bit hard and a little hot, and then my solution owner or the person I'm talking to kind of feels crap. And sometimes that's useful, but other times there's a softer approach that can help to build a better relationship. And that's where empathy is very valuable. So what skills make up empathy? Let's think about understanding the variables. So a trait is composed of specific actions. The better you are able to apply these actions, which we can call skill, the more likely you are to consistently achieve the outcome, hence giving you the trait. A wonderful way to think about that is somebody who has, who doesn't come across as being very friendly. Maybe they never smile. Maybe they don't make eye contact. Maybe they don't use people's names. Maybe they speak in a monotone. And if that's what happened and you walked into somewhere and someone didn't look at you, didn't acknowledge you, didn't use your name, spoke in a monotone, and had a neutral face, you would probably think they were less friendly than someone who did the opposite of all those behaviors. And then you might just be like, wow, well, Summer is a pretty friendly guy. But I could learn to do all of those behaviors. And so here is breaking the belief that you can't learn to use different little skills that when you practice become a part of your operating system. One of the biggest here is active listening. And this is easily thought about as how engaged are you when you're listening? Is your mind present or elsewhere? Are you thinking other things, looking for an angle, or are you genuinely curious? Do you paraphrase back to them and repeat the information that they've said back to you? Do you ask clarifying questions when something could be considered unclear, or there's a specific word that you know people have differing definitions to? Do you have a certain body language? Do you move your face and your arms, your shoulders? And where do you look with them? Are you looking at the words on your screen? Are you looking at the camera? Are you looking into their eyes if you're in person? All of these things can make up active listening. And this is one of the skills that can comprise of, that empathy can comprise of. But I would say that it's the most important one. Another piece here is, do you hear what they don't say? What are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to maintain an image to you, to their colleagues? Are they covering up a mistake? Sometimes the message lies in what they don't say. And I was recently getting some feedback on one of my own calls, and I missed the executive sponsor had a shift in their body language when I mentioned that they were really great in these 4 out of 5 areas. Now, they were also really great in the 5th area, but they just weren't as great. And this person clearly takes a lot of pride in doing great because they put a lot of work in. I didn't position myself well by capitalizing on that body language, and I bulldozed right over it because I was looking at the camera. I wasn't watching for their body language. And so that's an interesting scenario. Where do you choose to look? Looking back over the call, it looks really obvious when it's pointed out. How many of those micro moments do we miss, right? When we don't have someone who's looking in over our shoulder. And okay, there you go. Do you watch their body language? So if you are in person or you're over video, do you watch their posture, shoulders, eyes, mouth, hand gesture? Okay, so you're just trying to think about as many different things as you can connect with. And then tonality. This one's huge. We send emails a lot, Slack, LinkedIn, all the different ways to communicate with letters and words. But do you understand how they use their tone to convey information? Each person is different. There are commonalities between us. This is one that I struggle with because I don't always know, okay, when I hear a shift in tonality, what do I do with that shift? How do I change my approach to get them back onto track? And so I personally think empathy is a really high skill cap in that you can just keep going. I don't know that there is an upper limit to how much you can learn there. Okay, up next, we're going to be thinking about putting yourself in their shoes. Okay, so we're thinking about putting ourselves into our customers' shoes. We've gone over what customer success is, we've gone over how sales professionals are uniquely positioned to excel in customer success roles. We've gone over some mindset shifts and differences that some may need to make. I certainly did. And we've gone over one of the key skills or traits that a CSM has. And that was one of my biggest objections to thinking that I could be a great CSM. I didn't really think that I had that trait. I still have conflict with that internally, but I guess, we can pull out a saying here to say that growth occurs when you do what you do not feel qualified to do. So I'm growing in that department. Here we're going to be talking about putting ourselves into their shoes. And this piece is interesting. Using knowledge gathered. So the way that we use our gathered knowledge about our customer over time, we're gathering knowledge and information, is that we can put ourselves into their shoes as closely as possible to how they'll actually feel. And when we do that, we can speak their language, we can look at things from their point of view, we can empathize with them more impactfully. When we make recommendations, they feel very logical. And as a byproduct, our customer is going to feel understood. And there's a really nice sort of mantra or saying, which is seek to understand before being understood. So if we understand them, they will open the door for us to become understood. And when they're opening with their ears and they're open-minded, then we can guide them to a better state or a solution to the problem they're having. And this carries directly from the last module of empathy, because if we just dive right in with a solution, then we don't always truly capture the whole problem. And on the flip side, we don't always capture what upside might be on the other side of that problem. There could be some economical benefit to solving the problem in a different way. So seeking to understand. There you go. I guess the one key here is don't make their vulnerability about you. This has been a tough one for me. It still is in my personal life, less so in my work life. And sometimes when someone is sharing something vulnerably, I want to connect with them. And so I might share a story about myself. My wife doesn't love that because it's meant to be about her, which is very fair enough. And I think that carries itself into the professional world as well. When a solution owner is, or contact is sharing something, that sharing that story about yourself may feel good to you, but it's good to critically assess, does it feel good to them? Right? So don't make their vulnerability about you. Perspective. Your tool, the solution, the product, the service, is often just a portion of their job. They may have 5 other vendors. Maybe they don't. But it's good to keep perspective that while these problems may look huge to you, they may feel small to them. And the other way around, some problems may feel really big to them, even though you know that every single customer in your book has that problem. It doesn't take away from how big that problem is to them. So you've got to maintain perspective. Next, we're going to dive ourselves into balancing empathy with practical problem solving. And what does that look like? We need to understand where we're at. And Tony Robbins says this really, really well. I love this frame: state, story, strategy. If your emotional state is twisted, you're going to tell a story that supports that emotional state. And your actions will fall into line with whatever that story is, or your strategy, your plan to take action. So if you're chatting with somebody in a professional environment, and you can see that their state is all over the place, they're telling a story, maybe it's a bit of victim mindset, they feel like something has happened to them, trying to offer a solution or a strategy straight away may not ultimately get you to your desired end goal as quickly as applying some empathy, walking along that journey with them, making sure they feel understood and that you understood their problem, helping to shift the story, maybe through telling a different story, and then arriving at a strategy. So diving into it, let's have a look here. The goal of empathy. we're looking at understanding both their real and their perceived problem. A real problem is maybe you need to write on a piece of paper and you have one single pencil and the lead or the tip of that pencil has broken. It's observable. Multiple people can look at the problem and agree that the pencil not having a tip is blocking you from writing down, right? And so it's pretty objective. A perceived problem is maybe the world is against me. Nothing's going my way today. I just can't achieve anything because the pencil tip broke. Even though we know that in the world of physics, that the amount of pressure applied to the pencil tip is most probably what caused the fracture. It's observable, but it might feel different. And if you're tackling an observable problem, even though someone has a perception around that problem, I've found, as someone who defaults to tackling an observable problem, isn't always the most effective route to get to shared understanding. So then we're looking at solving the problem. And the other side to that coin is no matter how much empathy you throw at something and understand something, it's not going to solve that problem. Action will. So going back to our analogy of the pencil, if you go, oh my God, the world's against you, it's terrible, oh no, you can't write anything down. You can empathize to your heart's content, but only physically picking up the sharpener or going and getting a new superior pencil or a pen is going to resolve the problem in the real world and then create some sort of result, outcome, or change in the status quo. So you always have to think about balancing empathy and then leading them to that point of practical problem solving. And here it's listening deeply, but always keeping that aim, that North Star to steer the ship toward something actionable. On the flip side to that, and this is a personal preference, defining your boundaries. Personally, I would love to understand the problem, be it a perceived or a real observable problem. But we have to respect our own time too. And if you have 5 one-hour meetings back to back, and you have a customer and you're 40 minutes in and they've opened up a can and all they do is talk, and they consistently have shown that they do not apply things in action yet, maybe this particular person needs to be steered to the action of the call being over a little bit faster. And sometimes it's going to happen. And you may not be talking to the right person within the organization. But everyone has a key, I believe. It's up to us to try and find it. So empathy built on continuous learning. And this here is more of a mindset than something physical and applicable. So what we're thinking about here is the more you know, the more you realize there is to know. And so approaching anything with arrogance as defined by a belief that you are superior to others is definitely a way to present where you might rub off not that well on your solution owner. So approaching everything with an open mind and a childlike curiosity is where that nice, open, genuine feeling of, hey, I'm actually really curious. How did you get to where you are right now? Hey, wow, what would happen if XYZ occurred? Huh, and who would that impact? Right. Trying to walk through to get a whole picture clear from their mouth in their words. And so that's listening openly without judgment. We're going to make judgment, but it's taking that thought and popping it in a box. Maybe we can look at it later. Right now, we're there to serve our customer in whatever way makes the most sense. And that might be changing the conversation topic. It's not to get walked over, but it's putting your personal beliefs aside for a moment to be able to talk human. Understanding their environment, which we can do outside of a conversation. Just thinking about what external factors are impacting their industry, their company, their department, maintaining an open mind about that. Okay, so skip on ahead. After you look at their environment, we're going to have a look at the personal factors. So what's personally happening to drive their behavior? Do they have an upcoming maternity leave that they're going to take, or someone on their team's taking? Do they just go keto? We may laugh, but those two things happened in like the last 2 months for me, right? And the upcoming maternity leave was a pretty big deal because this team was losing its powerhouse and half of its staff. It's a 2-person team. So then here I have the opportunity to empathize with the position that my solution owner is in and understand that they will have less time available to them. They have a resource constraint. They also will be getting a higher influx of problems. There's going to be a shift in their attention. And it's a pretty good time for me to offer some paid services so that they can, instead of paying the price of hiring someone, they can leverage a little bit of their budget to bring a consultant in who's got the experience and who can pick up some of that bandwidth so they maintain momentum. The Just Going Keto one, bit of a joke. They're a little bit grumpy, but they let us know, so it was all okay. And then here, we're trying to identify with them, so trying to identify with their point of view. And I always just come back to this piece that if I had lived their life, the odds are I would have their perspective. Interesting thing to think about. There are lots of different perspectives in the world. I can think back 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years when I had a point of view that has radically changed. And so giving people a little bit of leniency to have their point of view, but to understand that it may not be right, but it may not be up to us to change it. We can simply help guide them down a different path and give everyone a little bit of humility. That's the last piece there. And we're just going to run back through. We're not going to cover off in a traditional summary. You're already doing all of this. The odds are you're talking to people every day. Candidates who come from an operational or reactive role, like support, are behind on this skill. And this is one of the other unique factors that make someone who has time spent selling, persuading, sharing stories, communicating with other people. They're little things, and they take a long time to build up, and you have to do a lot of reps to get them, but you're probably already doing it. This one's interesting. When I say use this on your colleagues, I mean your future colleagues, so other CSMs that you may be speaking to, other departments. If you're in a tech type environment, you may operate with account management, product marketing, product people, enablement, all sorts of different roles. But importantly, during that interview process, hiring managers. If they were your customer, what would be driving them? What's happening in Mr. or Mrs. hiring manager's personal life that drives urgency to hire for this role? What's happening within their department? What does their departmental leader want? What goals or initiatives are they trying to meet? What's this company trying to achieve? Is it trying to increase its revenue through customer success cross-sell initiatives because it's noticed that the lifetime value of its customers is a little bit low, and they've seen a gap and an opportunity to upskill their customer success managers in cross-selling? Well, guess what? If you've already come from selling, you can do above average, fantastic discovery. You're able to have commercial conversations and position features and benefits in a way that feels safe and makes sense and is logical to your customers. Maybe you've got a leg up there. Up next, we are going to be looking at common customer success misconceptions. And this should spell the last of the knowledge pieces here. The circle or the cycle that I think about is we're in a position, we identify a goal that we want. We realize that if we knew everything to get that goal and we applied it all, we'd have the goal. So there obviously is some form of knowledge and or skill gap. And what I've been trying to do here is equip you with the knowledge to understand what customer success is it right for you, and to walk through a few of the limiting things. So let's get to work, okay? And I'll see you on the next one.